It had been nearly 3 years since Emma's wedding ring had disappeared, only for her to stumble upon it in a local pawnshop window. Her heart races as she recognizes the unique engraving inside the band. Overwhelmed with joy, she rushed into the shop, eager to reclaim an important lost piece of her past. However, as the shop owner recounted the story of the ring's arrival, Emma's joy quickly turned to shock. After learning who had sold the ring to the pawn shop, Emma, shaking, dialed 911, her mind racing with disbelief. "Hey, lady, what are you doing?" the guy cried out as Emma grabbed her phone and dialed 911. She was looking at the ring, the look in her eye dazed. She really couldn't believe they would do something like that to her, and to keep it a secret for 3 years too. It was theft, and Emma knew that talking to them first wouldn't bring her anywhere. She had to get police officials involved to really make her case. She noticed the hand waving in front of her face as the line rang. She shook herself out of her daze with that, giving the pawnshop owner a questioning look, not having heard the question he had asked before. "Missy, what do you think you were doing?" he asked exasperatedly. "I'm calling the cops. There has been a theft." Emma couldn't help but notice how the pawnshop owner's eyes widened. "Missy, I promise you, I have not stolen anything from you. I don't know what you're talking about." I wanted to respond, but I could hear the dispatcher. 911, what is your emergency?" Emma heard the dispatcher say. "I would like to report a theft." But who had stolen the ring from Emma? Why was the pawnshop owner so apprehensive of her calling the police? And most importantly, how would Emma get revenge on the thief? It had been nearly 3 whole years since the loss of Emma's wedding ring. Emma and her husband had only been married for a few months when the ring appeared to be lost. Emma remembered having searched high and low for the little golden band. But even after turning her home upside down, it remained nowhere to be found. Emma had blamed herself before she blamed anyone else. Maybe it had slipped of her fingers. Maybe it had gone down the drain during a shower. Maybe it had gone down the garbage disposal after washing her hands. It couldn't have been anyone else because who would do such a thing? Well, today she found that she had been wrong with that assumption and she truly couldn't believe who had done it. Back then, she eventually decided to give up on her search. "It will come back if it is meant for me," she had muttered to herself during moments when she was close to tears. Her husband, Mark, who had felt sorry for her, had decided to buy her a new ring during their 6-month anniversary, but it never felt the same, never did hold the same weight. If only she had looked at others, she would have seen that the perpetrator was right in front of her all this time. The fact that she had almost walked past it again, might I add. One could even say that her seeing the ring was a twist of fate. She had walked past that window quite a few times, ever since the ring laid on display. But today had been the day that she had truly been looking. She had been looking for a watch, and seeing the ring had just been a happy coincidence. You see, Emma and Mark's anniversary was coming up, and she knew he was thinking about getting a new watch. She knew what he had been looking for, and Emma had been hoping to surprise him with getting one herself. She couldn't help but check out the local pawn shop, hoping that there might be some treasure between all that junk. She could never have imagined her ring would be lying in that display. Her nose was against the window as soon as she saw it. "I can't believe it," Emma muttered to herself, her voice reverberating against the glass that was starting to fog up. She squinted, noting the intricacies that reminded her of her own wedding band. However, it wasn't until she saw the engraving inside the ring that she knew. "My heart is, and will always be, yours," Emma muttered, the tears pooling in her eyes. It was a quote from one of her favorite Jane Austen novels, Sense and Sensibility. She was sure that it could no longer be a coincidence. This had to be her ring. With that knowledge, she rushed inside the pawn shop, her face red with excitement. "Hi, could I please take a closer look at the ring in the display case?" The pawnshop owner carefully grabbed the ring from the display case and handed it to Emma, who was visibly anxious. His hands moved with a practiced ease, showing he had done this countless times before. Emma's fingers twitched with anticipation as she reached out for the ring. She barely noticed the curious glance the owner shot her way, all her attention focused on the small band of gold he now placed in her trembling hand. Emma examined the ring closely, her hands trembling, and confirmed it was indeed her old wedding band. The familiar weight and worn edges felt like a part of her. She turned it over, tracing the engraving with her thumb. "It really is mine," she whispered, a mix of relief and anger building inside her. The memories of her wedding day flooded back, making her grip the ring even tighter. With a shaky voice, Emma asked the owner how the ring had ended up in his pawn shop. "Do you remember who sold this?" she inquired, trying to keep her voice steady. The shop owner scratched his head, looking slightly perplexed. "I'll need to check the records," he replied slowly, as if piecing things together himself. Emma's heart pounded as she awaited his response, each second feeling like an eternity. The owner, looking puzzled, said he needed to check his records and disappeared into the back room. Emma watched him go, her mind racing with questions. She scanned the small, cluttered shop, her thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. The ticking of a nearby clock seemed to grow louder, echoing her impatience. She tapped her foot, feeling the weight of 3 years of mystery pressing down on her shoulders. Emma stood at the counter, her mind racing, as she anxiously waited for the owner to return with answers. The minutes dragged on, each tick of the clock heightening her anxiety. She fiddled with the ring, turning it over and over in her hand. 1,000 scenarios played out in her mind, each one more troubling than the last. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves, knowing she needed to stay focused. The pawnshop owner emerged from the back room, holding a worn ledger book, and approached Emma. His face was serious, eyes squinting slightly as he flipped through the pages. "All right, let's see what we have here," he muttered, his finger tracing down a column of names and dates. Emma watched intently, her pulse quickening with every second. The weight of the ledger seemed to hold all the answers she needed. He explained that the ring had been sold to him only a month ago, but the seller's identity was not recorded. "It's policy to get an ID, but sometimes folks slip through the cracks," he admitted, looking a bit embarrassed. Emma felt a surge of frustration, mixed with curiosity. "No name, no address, nothing?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Just a description," he replied, shaking his head. Emma felt a mix of frustration and curiosity, pressing the owner for more details about the transaction. "What did this person look like? Anything unusual about them?" she asked urgently. The owner rubbed his chin, thinking hard. "They were average height, middle-aged, wore a baseball cap. Nothing really stood out," he said slowly. Emma's heart sank. This vague description was hardly helpful, but she couldn't give up now. The owner asked Emma why she was so interested, sensing the urgency in her voice. "Why is this ring so important to you?" he inquired, eyebrows raised. Emma took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. "It's my wedding ring," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was stolen from me nearly 3 years ago." The owner's eyes widened in surprise as he absorbed this revelation. Emma revealed that the ring was her stolen wedding ring, missing for nearly 3 years. "I thought it was lost forever," she confessed, tears threatening to spill over. "Finding it here is like a miracle, but I need to know who took it." The owner nodded, looking sympathetic. "I understand," he said softly. "Let's see what we can do to get to the bottom of this." Emma felt a glimmer of hope. The pawnshop owner, wide-eyed, immediately claimed his innocence, insisting he had no idea the ring was stolen. "I swear, miss, I didn't know," he stammered, hands raised defensively. "I'm just running a business here, trying to make an honest living." Emma could see the sincerity in his eyes, and though her heart was still racing, she felt a twinge of sympathy for the man standing before her. Emma, sensing his sincerity, assured him she believed him, but explained she had to call the police. "I don't think you're involved, but I need to report this," she said gently, yet firmly. The owner nodded, his expression a mix of relief and concern. "I understand," he replied. "Do what you have to do." Emma took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She informed him that the theft had been reported years ago and was part of an ongoing investigation. "This ring was stolen from me almost 3 years ago," Emma explained, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "The police have been looking for it ever since." The owner's eyes widened further, and he nodded slowly, as if processing the gravity of her words. "That's serious," he muttered. The owner, looking relieved yet concerned, agreed and offered to assist by providing any security footage. "I have cameras in the shop," he said, pointing to a small device in the corner. "I can get you the footage from when the ring was sold." Emma felt a wave of gratitude. "That would be incredibly helpful," she replied, her voice softening. The owner disappeared into the back again, leaving Emma alone with her thoughts. Emma dialed 911, her heart pounding, and explained the situation to the dispatcher, detailing the theft and recent discovery. "I've found my stolen wedding ring in a pawn shop," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's been missing for nearly 3 years." The dispatcher assured her that help was on the way. Emma hung up, feeling a mix of fear and anticipation as she awaited the arrival of the police. After hanging up with the dispatcher, Emma anxiously paced around the pawn shop, feeling a mix of fear and anticipation. Her steps were quick and restless, her mind racing with what might happen next. She glanced around the cluttered shop, her eyes darting from one item to another, but nothing held her attention for long. The weight of the situation pressed down on her, making her breath come in shallow, rapid bursts. The dispatcher had assured Emma that officers were on their way, but the minutes felt like hours. Each second seemed to drag on, the ticking clock mocking her impatience. Emma checked her watch repeatedly, hoping to see the time had moved faster than it had. Her heart pounded with every passing moment, the silence of the shop amplifying her anxiety. She tried to stay calm, but the wait was agonizing. The pawnshop owner tried to calm Emma, offering her a seat and a glass of water, though she could barely sit still. "Please, have a seat," he urged gently, pushing a chair towards her. Emma sat down for a moment, taking the glass with shaky hands, but she soon stood up again, unable to stay still. "I'm fine, thank you," she murmured, her mind too preoccupied to focus on anything else. Emma glanced at the door repeatedly, her mind racing with thoughts of how this ordeal would unfold. She imagined the police walking in, taking statements, and watching the security footage. Each scenario that played out in her head made her more anxious. Would they find any clues? Would they believe her story? The uncertainty gnawed at her, making her feel both hopeful and fearful at the same time. Finally, she heard the sound of sirens, and her heart skipped a beat as the police arrived to investigate. The wailing grew louder, signaling that help was near. Emma's breath hitched, and she stood frozen for a moment before rushing to the door. The flashing lights outside brought a strange mix of relief and dread. She knew that the next few moments could change everything, and she braced herself for what was to come. The police officers entered the pawn shop, introduced themselves, and immediately began questioning the owner about the ring. "Good afternoon, sir. We're here regarding a reported theft," the lead officer said, flashing his badge. The owner nodded nervously, gesturing towards Emma. "This young lady found her stolen ring here. I had no idea it was stolen." The officers exchanged looks, then turned back to the owner. "We need to see any records you have about this ring," one officer said. The owner led the officers to the back room, showing them the ledger and explaining the details of the sale. "This is where we log all transactions," he explained, flipping open the worn book. The officers leaned in, scrutinizing the entries. "It was sold about a month ago," the owner continued, pointing to the date, "but the seller's details are very sparse." The officers nodded, noting down the information carefully. Emma watched as the officers reviewed the security footage, her anxiety growing with each passing second. The small screen flickered to life, displaying grainy images of the shop. "Here's the date in question," the owner said, fast-forwarding to the relevant part. Emma's heart pounded as the footage played, showing a figure entering the shop and approaching the counter. The officers leaned in closer, examining every detail. One of the officers paused the video, zooming in on the person who sold the ring, and asked Emma if she recognized them. "Do you know this person?" he asked, pointing at the screen. Emma squinted at the blurry image, her breath catching in her throat. She leaned in closer, her heart racing. "It's hard to tell, but—" "Yes?" "I think I do," she whispered, fear and disbelief mingling in her voice. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the figure on the screen, confirming the identity of her mother-in-law, Claire, to the officers. "That's Claire," she said, her voice shaking. "My mother-in-law." The officers exchanged glances, noting her reaction. "Are you sure?" one of them asked. Emma nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm positive. I can't believe she would do this," she murmured, feeling a mix of betrayal and sadness. The police took detailed notes about the suspect's appearance and behavior captured in the footage. They jotted down every detail Emma provided, from Claire's distinct posture to her nervous gestures. "This is important information," one officer said, scribbling furiously. "It'll help us in our investigation." Emma watched them work, feeling a strange mix of relief and dread. The truth was out, and there was no turning back now. Emma described her relationship with her mother-in-law, telling them she could have never expected this from her. "Claire and I were close," she explained, her voice cracking. "She's always been so supportive, or so I thought." The officers listened attentively, nodding as they took notes. "This betrayal is shocking," Emma continued, shaking her head. "I can't believe she would do something like this. It's devastating for our family." The officers reassured Emma they would follow up on this lead and continue their investigation. "We understand how difficult this must be for you," one officer said kindly. "Rest assured, we'll look into this thoroughly." Emma nodded, appreciating their support. "Thank you," she said softly. The officers exchanged a look, then turned back to Emma. "We'll keep you updated on any developments," another officer promised, giving her a reassuring smile. Emma provided additional context about the theft, emphasizing the emotional toll it had taken on her and her husband. "It's been a nightmare," she confessed, her eyes welling up. "Mark and I have struggled so much since the ring went missing. It felt like a piece of our marriage was stolen." The officers listened sympathetically, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We'll do everything we can to resolve this," one officer assured her. The police thanked Emma and the pawnshop owner for their cooperation, promising to keep them updated on the case. "Your help is invaluable," the lead officer said, shaking hands with both of them. Emma felt a wave of gratitude. "I just want to find out the truth," she replied. The owner nodded in agreement. "We'll get to the bottom of this," the officer added, giving Emma a determined look before they left. Emma returned home, feeling a whirlwind of emotions, and immediately shared the developments with her husband, Mark. "You won't believe what happened," she began, her voice trembling with both relief and anxiety. Mark looked up from his book, eyes wide with concern. "Tell me everything," he urged, putting the book aside. Emma took a deep breath and recounted the entire incident, from finding the ring to the shocking revelation about Claire. Mark was shocked and supportive, expressing his disbelief and anger about the betrayal they had just uncovered. "My own mother?" he exclaimed, shaking his head in disbelief. "How could she do this to us?" His face flushed with anger, but he quickly softened, pulling Emma into a comforting hug. "We'll get through this," he promised. "We'll find out why she did it and make sure it never happens again." They discussed their next steps and resolved to face this challenge together. "We need to figure out our approach," Emma said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "Should we confront her ourselves or let the police handle it?" Mark nodded thoughtfully. "I think we should talk to her first, see if she'll admit to it," he suggested. "But we'll need a plan if things don't go well." Emma agreed, feeling more determined than ever. They called Emma the same night, telling her they had found enough evidence of Claire to start with the next steps. The phone rang, and Emma quickly answered. "Hello," she said, her voice tense with anticipation. "Mrs. Thompson, we've reviewed the footage and have enough to proceed," the officer informed her. Emma thanked them, hanging up and turning to Mark. "It's time," she said, feeling a mix of fear and determination. "We need to confront Claire." Emma felt a mix of anxiety and determination, knowing she had to see this through to the end. She looked at Mark, who gave her a reassuring nod. "We'll do this together," he said firmly. Emma took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. "I know," she replied, her voice steady. "We need to get to the bottom of this, no matter what." With that, they began to plan their confrontation. After a conversation with Mark, Emma decided that it would be best for her and Mark to confront his mother instead of the officers. "We need to hear her side of the story first," Emma said, her voice firm. Mark agreed, squeezing her hand. "It's going to be tough, but we'll do it together," he reassured her. They knew this confrontation would be challenging, but it felt like the right thing to do. Emma and Mark met up with the officers at the station and told them the plan they had in mind for themselves. "We want to talk to her directly," Mark explained. The officers listened carefully, their faces showing a mix of concern and understanding. "Are you sure about this?" one of them asked. Emma nodded, determination in her eyes. "Yes, we need to do this ourselves," she said resolutely. The officers were apprehensive at first, telling Emma she might try to lie. "Sometimes people can be very convincing," one officer warned. "She might deny everything or twist the story." Emma understood their concern, but remained steadfast. "We're aware of the risks," she replied calmly. "But this is something we need to handle on our own, at least initially." The officers exchanged looks, weighing their options. However, Emma assured them that if Claire tried to weasel her way out of it, she would instead let the police handle it. "If she lies or refuses to cooperate, we'll call you immediately," Emma promised. The officers seemed slightly more at ease with this assurance. "All right," one of them said slowly. "We'll trust you on this, but stay cautious." Emma nodded, feeling a bit more confident about their plan. The officers agreed to be on standby, and for Mark and Emma to handle it themselves first. "We'll be ready if you need us," the lead officer said, giving them a reassuring nod. Emma and Mark thanked them, feeling the weight of the situation settle over them once more. "Let's get this over with," Mark said as they left the station, determination etched on his face. Emma took a deep breath, ready for what lay ahead. Mark and Emma made their way over to Mark's parents' home, Emma nervously fidgeting with her wedding band on her finger. The drive was quiet, each lost in their thoughts. Emma twisted the ring around, the familiar weight grounding her. "We've got this," Mark said, breaking the silence and giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. Emma nodded, hoping her heart would settle by the time they arrived. As Claire greeted them by the front door, her eyes spotting the ring on Emma's finger as Claire grew visibly nervous. "Hello, dears," she said, her voice faltering slightly. Her gaze lingered on the ring, and a flicker of recognition and fear crossed her face. Emma saw Claire's hands tremble as she stepped aside to let them in. Mark exchanged a knowing look with Emma before they entered. Mark decided to lead the conversation, telling his mother that Emma had stumbled upon the ring per chance and allowed her to confess. "Mom, something happened today," he began, his tone serious. Claire looked between them, her face paling. "Emma found her wedding ring," he continued. "We want to give you a chance to explain." Claire's eyes widened, and she took a shaky breath, struggling to find words. Mark told her that they had seen the camera footage of her giving the ring to the pawn shop owner, and Claire burst into tears. "Mom, we saw the footage," he said, his voice gentle but firm. Claire's composure crumbled, and she sank into a chair, sobbing. "I'm so sorry," she cried. "I didn't know how to tell you. I was so ashamed." Emma felt a pang of sympathy despite her anger. She admitted to having done it, but feeling ashamed now after these 3 years. "I took the ring," Claire confessed through her tears. "I've regretted it every single day. I was jealous and angry, and I made a terrible mistake." Her voice was filled with remorse, and she looked at them with pleading eyes. Emma and Mark listened, the weight of her words sinking in deeply. She told them that she had stolen the ring out of jealousy over Emma's relationship with her son. "I felt like I was losing Mark," Claire admitted, her voice trembling. "You two were so close, and I was afraid of being left out." Emma's heart ached to hear this, but it didn't erase the hurt. Mark looked stunned, processing his mother's words. "Mom, we never meant to shut you out," he said quietly. The mother-in-law, visibly distressed, admitted her guilt and explained that selling the ring was driven by overwhelming guilt. "I couldn't stand seeing it," Claire confessed, tears streaming down her face. "It was a constant reminder of my mistake. I thought getting rid of it would make me feel better, but it only made things worse." Her hands shook as she spoke, and Emma could see the genuine regret in her eyes. Emma listened intently, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal as her mother-in-law spoke. She wanted to shout, to cry, but instead, she took a deep breath and tried to understand. "Why didn't you come to us?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with pain. Claire looked down, ashamed. "I was too proud," she whispered. Emma felt the weight of those words, the depth of the hurt they had all endured. They discussed the impact of the theft on Emma and Mark's marriage, with Claire expressing deep regret. "It put a strain on us," Mark said, his voice heavy with emotion. "We thought it was lost forever. It affected us in ways you can't imagine." Claire nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she repeated. "I never wanted to hurt you both like this." Emma and Mark exchanged a look. Feeling the gravity of the moment, Emma decided to forgive Claire, but made it clear that trust would need to be rebuilt over time. "I forgive you," Emma said slowly, "but it's going to take time to heal." Claire nodded, understanding the significance of Emma's words. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I'll do whatever it takes to make amends." Emma took a deep breath, feeling a sense of closure begin to settle in her heart. Emma and Mark worked on rebuilding trust in their relationship, focusing on open communication and mutual support. They spent evenings talking through their feelings, ensuring that no misunderstandings lingered. "We've been through so much," Mark said one night, holding Emma's hand. "But we're stronger for it." Emma nodded, feeling grateful for his unwavering support. Their bond grew deeper, and they made a promise to always be honest and supportive, no matter what challenges they faced. The police closed the case, returning the ring to Emma and officially concluding the investigation. "We're happy to give this back to its rightful owner," the officer said with a smile as he handed Emma the ring. Emma's eyes filled with tears of joy as she slipped the ring back on her finger. "Thank you," she whispered, overwhelmed with gratitude. The officers nodded, pleased to see a happy resolution to the case. Emma felt a sense of closure, finally having her wedding ring back after years of uncertainty and heartache. She stared at the ring, the familiar weight and shine bringing back memories of her wedding day. "It's really over," she said softly to Mark. He hugged her tightly, sharing in her relief. "We can move forward now," he replied, his voice filled with hope. The pain of the past years began to fade. She and Mark planned a small celebration to mark the return of the ring and the resolution of the ordeal. They invited close friends and family to a cozy gathering at their home. "It's a fresh start," Emma said, smiling as she decorated their living room with flowers and candles. Mark nodded, feeling the warmth of their renewed happiness. The celebration was filled with laughter, love, and a sense of new beginnings for everyone. Emma wore her ring with pride, feeling stronger and more resolved, knowing they had overcome a significant challenge together. Every glance at the band reminded her of their journey and the strength they had found within themselves. "We did it," she said to Mark, her voice full of conviction. "Yes, we did," he replied, smiling. With their bond renewed and their hearts lightened, Emma and Mark faced their future with unshakable confidence and love.
You like this touching and surprising story? If so, we invite you to leave us a comment expressing your opinion. If you want to continue enjoying inspiring stories like this one, subscribe to our channel or check out the other videos shown at the bottom of the screen. Thank you for your cooperation.